Welcome to the Mad Love Your Life Show. I'm Mary D, the Joy Catalyst, here to be your host and transformation guide. Mad Love is about the mad, making a difference, and love is what we serve up to live a delicious life. My intention is to help you spark new ideas, break limiting beliefs, and align with your deepest dreams and desires. Get ready for laughter, inspiration, and finding your inner roar in every show. Hey, welcome back, everyone. We are kicking off August with celebrating recovery as an overall theme. And for some of you, recovery might mean drugs, it might mean alcohol, or it could mean bad dating habits. I like to think of it as anything you've gone through in life that injured your heart, your body, or your soul, but you overcame it. So, what is it that you have recovered from? What would you like to recover from? I know that I recovered from breast cancer and from also being a lender. Some of you are like, wait, a lender? What's that, Mary? I have literally acted like a bank for so many people on my journey, and I did it to my detriment. And after the last time I did it, I was finally done. It was one of those lessons I kept having to learn over and over again, and I was really irritated about it this last time. What about you? What have you recovered from? What is showing up for you that you know you need to be in recovery for? This July, I actually ended up with my book count at the end of the month at 10. I'm on a pretty steady streak this year. So I'm excited to be able to tell you that I have read over 70 books this year. And it's been amazing. And it's crazy to look back and realize that I've actually consumed that much content. And it's been a mix. It's been a mix of fiction and nonfiction and personal development and motivation and finance and all kinds of fun stuff. There's also this one little mini series of 2 books this last month that really caught my attention. I read the first one, and then once I finished it, I realized that there was a second book. So I also dove into that one as well. And it's so funny because sometimes I see a book recommendation and I don't actually go read the summary. I just go ahead and check it out and I just start reading. And these particular books, the ones that I just dove into, I was entertained, but I was also able to find the lessons and experience some new perspectives. And I think that it's the perspective piece that I find the most enjoyable about many books. For example, I've never been to jail, but when I read a book that has a character who might be like experiencing a jail experience, the author often goes into a great job of describing the feelings the character is going through, the description of the space to set the scene. And when that happens, it allows me to step into that character's shoes and share some of those emotions. And I'm sure you're wondering what were the books that I read that I'm talking about. And the book titles, the first one is called It Ends With Us, and it was followed by a second book called It Starts With Us. And they're both works of fiction, but based on a true story written by Colleen Hoover. And funny enough, last night, as I went to type in the name of the first book so that I could give you all the title of the author, I actually saw a movie trailer pop up. And as it turns out, this book has been adapted for the big screen. And so it's going to be out in theaters later this week on the 9th. And now I will tell you the rule I typically follow is watch the movie first and then read the book. Because in my experience, the book is always better. But since I didn't even know the book was also going to be a movie, I'm actually looking forward to seeing the film version as well. I did find the storyline to be super timely because I do want to talk a little bit about it today. In the storyline, just to give you a little piece of it without ruining the experience for you, is that the story is about a lady who grew up with an emotionally and physically abusive father. She witnessed violence towards her mother from her father growing up, and then fell into both emotional and physical abuse in her own marriage. The whole time denying that she was acting like her mother, while eventually acknowledging that no, she was acting like her mother. And it's really moving. it's really insightful, and it's a perspective shift if you've never been in that situation. And then I think if you have been in that situation, it's something incredibly relatable. And I find that the work I've been called to lately has been around those people who are silently suffering in their relationships. And in this particular book, the character, she was doing this. She was silently suffering. And her silent suffering was in how she slowly lost herself in the process. And I see this happen in so many relationships. There are behaviors that we dismiss or overlook or sweep under the rug. We convince ourselves to, oh, just let it go, let it pass. We give it a slide. We let it go, hoping that it was nothing. Things will change. And then it happens again, and we let it slide again. And the next thing you know, 10 years have gone by, and that little thing that we've allowed to slide has slowly but surely chipped away at your standards until your new norm is in this place where there's soul-sucking behavior that you never actually thought you would tolerate. But because you've tolerated it for so long, you are in a cycle. And I also want to acknowledge that I totally get that life gets busy. 100%. I understand that. Life gets busy. We only have so much bandwidth. And sometimes we might let stuff slide because we're just exhausted. Sometimes life could be exhausting. All of you moms out there, whether you are a single mom or a mom that has some help, I know that it can be rough. And I know that from watching the people closest to me raise children and being in a household where children are being raised, even though they weren't mine. And this is where I have just so much love and respect for you. And I know that you are doing the best you can with what you have. I also, want to remind you that in this book that I was reading, before I picked it up, I didn't know anything about this book. So I do appreciate that it showed up on my reading list at a time when the character is exactly the kind of person that I'm feeling so called to help. And I think no coincidence that you're also listening today, whether you're the one doing some silent suffering yourself or whether you know someone who is. And I want to throw this out there because I did lead with the fact that there is a situation of abuse in the book as part of the silent suffering. But I want to also say that everyone who is silent suffering may not be in a necessarily abusive relationship. And I think that sometimes when we're talking about abusive relationships, it's of course easy to be like, yes, he or she should leave. No, abuse is never right. But the other scenario of this is the one that's maybe a little harder to chew on, which is, what if there's not any physical or emotional abuse, but you still are feeling like you're suffering? Maybe the suffering is just feeling lonely in your relationship. I know that was me for sure, being married for so long and still feeling kind of lonely. So, what are some of the things that are showing up, and what does that look like? And so, the abuse definition that I want to use as we go forward is replacing that with whatever thing is in your relationship that is sucking the life out of the partner who is the one having to make all the compromises. Or it could just be looking at the situation and saying, this is so out of alignment with who I am and where I'm going. And I think it's really, really important to look at your value system and make some decisions. And a lot of times, if you haven't given your value system a good look, now is a great time to do it. I also want to acknowledge in all of this that so often, especially when we're younger and getting into relationships, we grow out of those relationships eventually if two people aren't actually growing together, because we just become more of who we are as time goes on. We discover ourselves. We discover that the things that we used to like, we may not like anymore. We may discover that beliefs that we held, we don't hold anymore. We go through so much of life doing all of this learning and believing, and then we get experience. And through those experiences, we make some shifts. And the real question is, within these relationships, are we able to find those things that, create shifts sooner or later? Are they shifts that we get to do with our partner, or are they shifts that leave them behind in a way? And it happens. It happens. But the important part of this is not to continue to suffer. The important part of this is to be able to walk in and actually have the courage to have conversations, so that we can also get in tune with knowing that you care about this person, and ideally they care about you. And now there's a conversation that can happen where both of you can clear the air and get on the same page and powerfully make decisions moving forward. The things that show up as silent suffering, they can sometimes be disguised as love. They can show up coupled with an apology. They can show up with a promise to do better, followed by a little time of doing better, only to break again and go back into the cycle. And I listened to the stories of the folks that I work with, and it was interesting because the theme came up during my last retreat. I love that I get to work with really strong people. And I worked with a really strong woman who I've seen not take any flack in the workplace, but who over time, she got to a point where she was taking crap from her partner. So interesting to see the duality of like being able to not tolerate things at work, but tolerate them at home. And I've discovered that we all tolerate a lot in the name of love. And sometimes we can find ourselves sacrificing our needs for the sake of peace in the relationship. I see this happen most when things finally get to a place where everyone's playing cordially and no one wants to set off the other person because it's going to mean even more chaos. And I want to ask you, where in your life are you allowing this to happen? And can you get really honest with yourself about why you have allowed it? And if you're saying, well, I didn't allow it, then it did show up. So why wouldn't you make any steps to change it? And I say all of that so that you can get curious with yourself about your behavior, not so that you end up blaming yourself or beating yourself up about it. It's just a real opportunity to get honest with ourselves. And honesty is such a beautiful, great step. Because until we're aware of what we're allowing or not allowing, we can then begin to figure out what we want to do. And once we figure out what we want to do, we can get brave enough to actually do it. In season 1 of my podcast, I gave y'all an exercise, and the quick breakdown of it was asking why multiple times. It's asking it deeply and asking it over and over again so that you can really get down to understanding why you make the choices you make, or why you want to change something that you haven't changed yet. And I'm not the originator of this concept, by the way. I imagine whoever they were, they understood the power of pattern recognition and were also very curious by nature. And it's such a simplistic thing, but it also makes so much sense because we can continue to ask why, just like we get upset when little kids ask why. Part of this is knowing. It's getting down to the real why, because a lot of times that first why that we give ourselves of why we're doing something, well, why do you tolerate abusive, violent verbiage in your house? You might go, oh, Well, because I'm okay with, I grew up in a household like that. Okay, well, why? Because it's what I'm used to. Okay, why? And now you just keep going and you keep going until you can really get under that surface and under the layer. And often when that happens, we can go way back, y'all. We can go really way back. In the somatic sessions that I facilitate, we go into the body first, and then we retrieve the question that we actually want to get curious about so that we can all begin to get clear about what the outcome we're seeking is and the action that's going to get us there. So often it's easy to stay up in our head. And when we do that, we keep the thoughts bouncing around or stuffed in a corner to compete with a room full of ideas or stories or concepts. You've heard on the last few episodes me talking to the guests about meaning making, how we love to make things meaningful. We're humans, everything has a meaning. And it's only though when we drop into our body that we allow our mind to clear just enough to stop all the chatter, or at the very least, to slow it way down. And once it's slowed down, we can get grounded, and then we can get all the emotions and the logic, and then we can tap into our intuition as the guide for how we best move forward. Because I know, y'all, some of you are so logical and you're so methodical and everything's got a formula. And others of you are super emotional and everything is based on these highs and lows on how you feel. But the body knows, and your intuition is your best compass at the end of the day. And I like to say that intuition is the inner wisdom that you have. And that inner wisdom gives you the discretion and the discernment to collect data from your emotions and from your logic and make those decisions that are going to be the best for you. I was having a deep discussion with someone that was on a heavy note. And I remember getting to the point where I was aware that I was actually tapping my body while we were talking. And it was how I was regulating my nervous system during the discussion. I was literally tapping myself in the chest in a very even rhythm. And only when I was able to bring my awareness to the feelings in my body was I then able to see why I was choosing this modality. And I really didn't learn about tapping until after the fact. So I found it interesting that my natural inclination was to sit there and tap my chest. And it's the knowing, again, after the fact, I got to connect the dots and seeing that, oh, like this is me regulating my nervous system. Because when life gets heavy on us, it is a gift to give back to our body in whatever way feels most aligned and present. For you, it might be something like that physical tapping, or it might be using talk therapy, whether you do that with a professional or if you choose to do that with a friend or a group of friends or a bucket of ice cream. The most important thing is to make sure that you're taking time to process emotions and feelings. And I get that when we're on that back-to-back schedule or when we have a head full of thoughts constantly running at 100 miles an hour, we're not really giving ourselves time to sit with anything. And we're still expecting to come off of it without any side effects. But this is how stress is sneaky. And this is how our nervous system has to be on this steady stream of combat. And that is not, y'all, how we are designed to operate. When we're in a silent suffering situation, the stress your body is undergoing is basically learning to stay stuck in the body. For some of you, you're manifesting it by getting sick. I had a client who was terrible at using his voice in the workplace, bad at stating his needs. And because he was bad at doing it in the workplace, he also was very bad at doing it at home. And part of this, we both recognized, was a trauma response from when he was a child and felt like his opinions didn't matter, but that performance or achievement would earn love. He was a pleaser and he would take on so much work to the point that he actually knew there was no way he could physically get it done in time. And whenever the balls would start dropping and things would start going haywire and he couldn't meet the deadline, he and his body and his mind would all go into panic mode. And within days, he would get really, really sick. He literally manifested a system shutdown that forced him to stop everything when this would happen. And while that was going on, it meant something just didn't get done or someone else had to figure out how to get it done in his absence. It was his way of clearing his to-do list. And we had to really work on breaking that cycle by doing things like putting guidelines and boundaries in place, and then enrolling his team around those boundaries and also having him work on prioritizing and, of course, communication. And once he was able to surround himself with those systems, he could set the pace, and that gave him the confidence to communicate, which allowed him the ability to be much more productive in the time he had. And he learned to delegate and integrate breaks and stress relieving activities like walking the dog, playing golf, scheduling date nights with his wife. Silent suffering comes in lots of forms. For example, if you're crying yourself to sleep at night, if your thoughts are all consuming and you can't stop replaying a story in your head, if you feel fearful, if you're feeling unsafe, if your anxiety is up, if you incessantly bite or pick at your body, and if you're finding yourself sick all of the time for no good reason. And those are just a few of the symptoms that show up in silent suffering. So much of the time, silent suffering is happening because we're unable to speak up about the thing that is wrong. And most of the times, that wrong thing is happening within a relationship. And those relationships span across all sectors, whether it's work, your personal relationships with friends, your personal relationships with your family, your intimate relationship with your spouse or with your partner, your relationship even with yourself. So I really, really want to encourage you to end your own silent suffering. There is a place to find the confidence and the courage to be brave and to have a plan on how to say what you want to say, what you need to say. And if you want to learn more about that, you, of course, can book a call into us here at the Mad Love Agency, and I'm happy to help you through the frameworks that are going to get you clear on your next steps. We also have our next retreat in October. These frameworks are going to work for you in business, and they're going to work in the personal realm. You taking ownership of feelings and inaction and deciding to take action is actually the first step in really honing in leadership in your own life. So do it for you. And if you can't do it for yourself, do it for maybe your kids, because how you live is an example to them of how they should live. So just know that those little eyes are watching you. But more importantly, I really, really want to encourage you to circle back and do it for yourself, because that's where it really counts. And that's where you'll have the most impact, because your relationship with yourself is where it all begins and also where it all ends. With that, if any of you want to connect with us, if you want to connect with social media and more great content, you can do that down into the comment section. I also hope that you will join me for a super exciting show next week with fellow biohacker and podcaster Melanie Avalon. She's got all the secrets to live longer and live stronger, and I guarantee you that it's going to be a super juicy episode. Also, if you haven't subscribed already, please head over to YouTube at the Mad Love Your Life Show for the show recording and to subscribe to more great bonus content that I only release on YouTube. And until next time, may abundance always walk beside you. May joy always go before you, and may love always guide you on your path. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. We air live every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Bold Brave TV. We hope to see you back next week. For more ways to connect with my guests, content, programs, and retreats, just head over to www.marydee.com and subscribe. That's MARYDEE.com.